A bit of a feature through October and to the middle of November is the square between Mars and Neptune. And it's often spoken badly of, a Mars-Neptune square in your chart, and people will make all manner of stories up about how difficult you're going to find things. That's not realistic. There is no such thing as a bad aspect in astrology. There are some things which demand of us rather careful attention if we're to get it right, and the consequences of getting it wrong might be very difficult indeed. There are some aspects like that, and therefore some transits like that. And it could be that if you've got a Neptune kind of problem, such as you're lost in fantasy, or you're into drugs or alcohol in a big way, if you've got that kind of propensity, then Mars is going to come along and just make it really obvious that you shouldn't go too far with this stuff. So I think those of us who are a little bit inclined towards excess might find it a bit more challenging when Mars is in close aspect to Neptune, especially by square. But to be honest, that's not so many people really. Mars is in Gemini. It's in the 24th degree of Gemini at the moment when the exact square occurs. And this is a very strong affirmation of life. Children skating on ice. It's cold, they fall over and hurt themselves, but they still play on. And you have this kind of idea of raging against the dying of the light. Mars in Gemini can do lots of things at the same time, multitasking, and yet it uses its mental energy also in speech to deliver Mars-like commentary, which is sarcasm sometimes. It is not always wanted, but it's nevertheless sharp and to the point. And that seems to be quite a good thing when it comes to determining Neptune energy and its meaning. There's nothing wrong with a little bit of hard truth when you're lost in fantasy. So I think what we're trying to do during this 6-week period is to face criticism about the extent to which we're indulging silly fantasies. Now, Neptune is all about fantasy and making it all up and living the dream and getting lost in that. That's what Neptune does. And that's partly a good thing, because otherwise we would be terrified. It's just such a dangerous place, life. And so Neptune kind of makes it softer by giving us the illusion that it's actually hanging together properly. And that's okay, that's good, that's necessary up to a point. But if you go beyond that point, then you get lost in delusion, and your mind doesn't work properly anymore. And you make up silly ideas, and you believe in silly things, and you get led astray by unscrupulous salesmen, and you go too far into the realms of drugs and so on. Now Mars comes along, and in square it says this quite forcefully in a way. Look at that. Look at what it is that you're doing with your fantasies and your imagery of what life is all about. Just look at it. Maybe it's just not like that at all. Now, dressing up the harshness of life to make it a little bit softer, yes, but pretending it's totally something that it's not, no, that will never lead you anywhere that you want to be. That's a downward spiral. Very, very hard to rescue yourself from. And Mars is just speaking up now before it gets too bad too soon. It's saying, like, what are you doing? You know, what are you doing with your life? You're in this relationship with an abusive partner. Why? Or more particularly, for how long? How much longer? At what point are you going to stop this abuse? Or the same with a boss. You know, your boss treats you without respect, and you're doing a job that's soul destroying. If that phrase had any meaning, it just doesn't please the soul at all. Why? And more particularly, how much longer? Why doesn't really matter. How much longer are you going to put up with this? If you want something to continue indefinitely for the rest of your life, fine. If you don't want that, then no, not fine. You have to make an assertive changing of it. And that's what Mars can do. Mars is very assertive. In Gemini, it can understand things really quickly and come up with alternative ways of being. So we're facing a period of time now when we're being asked to change the worst of our fantasies, the glamour that we put out into the world, the inhabited island of Neptune in 24th degree of Pisces, which we've spoken of recently, the interaction that we have with other people, whether we want it to or not, tends towards being a little bit false. We might say we're better off than we are. We might present an image that we can't back up. We tend to do that as a species. And yeah, that's okay for a game, fake it till you make it kind of game. It's okay to soften the burden of harsh life. But until when? Until what happens? Until Mars comes in and says that no, we don't do that anymore. Let's energize ourselves towards a better way of presentation. So I'm seeing this Mars square Neptune in a positive light. And I think that's an important thing to underline, is that with these two mutable signs, Gemini and Pisces, they're subject to wavering and imprecision of presentation. They're mutable signs. You don't really know what's going on. And you have to make up your mind. You have to choose something. And Mars is quite good at that. It's all about changing things from what was to what will be. Mars does that very well. In Gemini, it changes your mind. It changes your friendship circle. It changes some of the many things that you do in your multitasking ability. It changes things very well. And with Neptune influencing the change, it will tend towards changing things from a grosser level of delusion to a highly spiritual level of understanding that this is all illusion. And that's what Neptune does. It's got this inhabited island to play with, all of these people having different opinions. It can shape shift, change its glamour, and yet through that process learn which of these illusions is actually the best presentation of something beyond illusion, deep within us, the essence self, which is not made known to us except by this process of discovery through trial and error. And Mars will speed that up. It will say, obviously that's wrong, move on. Here's another mistake. Great, we've made another mistake. Move on. Another mistake. Great, move on. Why is it happy? Because there's nothing else to do than make mistakes. That's all we ever do. This is a trial and error kind of life. So it just wants to make a mistake quickly and move on, and another and another and another. And Neptune is just saying, it's all the same to me. I don't care. And so you've got this wafting kind of energy in the background of your life where nothing actually matters. And that's okay, because actually nothing matters. Not to the soul. We have to raise our consciousness to that higher level of awareness where we know ourselves to be eternal and universal, and temporarily using this personality, using this body, using these scenarios that we're coming across, circumstances of our lives, in order to distinguish the difference between which illusion works for us and which doesn't. the extent to which it's a delusion and the extent to which it's just a fairy story. We're just playing around with a game here. The game of life is all made up from our imagination, and some of it really, really doesn't work very well, and some of it's all right for the time being. And we're going through a process of changing some of those things right now, and you could expect to change them again and again and again fairly quickly. Mars doesn't mess about. He wants to get on with things, and in Gemini most particularly so. And we will find that some of our silliness will be challenged. We won't stand up to criticism, and that might feel somewhat uncomfortable, even painful. But just wait a bit, not very long, and it'll feel great that you're free of that particular lie that you've been telling yourself, that particular bubble of a dream that's popped now. You've been living a lie, and somebody comes along and says that it is a lie, and it's uncomfortable moments that you experience. But afterwards, you know that you're rescued from a falseness that's unsustainable. And then you create another kind of falseness which you can sustain. And then another, indefinitely. That's life.